London, 2020. By every measure that matters, Graham Horngold's life is exactly where it should be. He has spent years building one of the most respected careers in British gastronomy, a celebrated pastry chef whose name carries real weight in the world of high-end cuisine. The kind of career that takes everything you have and gives back something most people only dream about: recognition, craft, purpose. And now, something even bigger. His partner Heather is pregnant, a child is coming, the final piece of a life that finally, completely makes sense. But there is one thing Graham Horngold has carried his entire life that no career achievement and no personal milestone has ever been able to touch. He was adopted. And somewhere out there, for 45 years, was a woman he had never met, never spoken to, never been able to ask the one question that adoption leaves permanently open inside a person. Why? Then, one ordinary morning, sitting at his phone like any other day, an email arrives. The sender's name is Dionne. She says she is his biological mother. She includes specific details about his birth, details so precise, so private, so impossible to fabricate that Graham's hands go still as he reads them. She has been looking for him. She found him. After 45 years of silence, the woman who gave him life had reached across the distance and chosen him. For a man who had spent his entire life wondering if he was wanted, it felt like the answer to everything. It was the beginning of the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Dionne Marie Hanna did not arrive in Graham's life quietly. She arrived like a miracle. From the very first contact, she was everything a person who had spent 45 years without a mother could possibly have imagined. Warm, attentive, overflowing with the kind of maternal energy that fills rooms and makes people feel almost immediately that they have been seen, that they matter, that they were always wanted, just separated by circumstances beyond anyone's control. But Dionne was not just emotionally generous, she was extraordinarily wealthy. She spoke of connections to Southeast Asian royalty, of a vast inherited fortune that crossed continents and generations, of a multi-million-pound inheritance that was coming, that would be Graham's, that was always meant to be his, that was simply waiting for the paperwork and the process and the patience that these things require. And in the meantime, she gave. Luxury hotel stays for Graham and Heather, expensive gifts delivered without occasion, brand new cars appearing as casually as flowers. She swept into the lives of Graham, his pregnant partner, and their closest friends, and made everyone feel that money was simply not something to think about, that abundance was the new normal, that this was what family felt like when family had everything. For Graham, it was not just the gifts, it was the shape of her. She fit perfectly into the exact space his life had always been missing. She asked questions only a mother would ask. She remembered details. She showed up. And Graham, a man who had wanted nothing more his whole life than simply to be someone's son, gave her everything she asked for. His trust, his love, his belief. All of it, completely, without reservation. It did not happen all at once. That is the thing about the most effective traps. They do not slam shut. They close so slowly, so gently, so reasonably, that by the time you feel the pressure, you are already deep inside them. It started small, a financial situation that needed brief attention, a temporary problem with transferring funds from overseas accounts, a bureaucratic delay holding up the inheritance that was, Dionne assured him, absolutely coming. Just a small bridge payment needed, just this once, just to keep things moving. Graham paid it. Then there was another situation, different circumstances, equally urgent, equally reasonable when explained by a woman who had just given you a car, who called to check on Heather's pregnancy, who remembered the names of your friends and asked after them by name. Graham paid that too. Then another, then another. Each request arrived wrapped in the language of family. Each one was backed by the enormous inheritance waiting just around the corner. Each one felt in isolation like a small and manageable act of trust between a son and the mother he had only just found. But they were not isolated. They were a system. And by the time Graham could see the system clearly, by the time the full shape of what had been done to him finally came into focus, nearly £300,000 was gone. His savings, his future, his newborn child's security, the financial foundation of everything he had built across an entire career, all of it vanished into the hands of the woman who had told him he was finally home. When the money was gone and the excuses stopped making sense, Graham Hornigold did what any person standing in the rubble of their own life would do. He demanded the truth. Not the truth about the inheritance, not the truth about the delays and the overseas accounts and the royal connections and the paperwork that never seemed to arrive. He demanded the only truth that still had the power to give him anything back. He demanded to know if she was really his mother. Because if Dionne Marie Hanna was not his biological mother, if the whole thing had been constructed from the very first email, if the birth details she had included were researched and fabricated and carefully designed to dismantle the defenses of a man who had spent his whole life wanting exactly this, then at least the grief had a clean shape. At least he had been a stranger deceived by a stranger. A DNA test was arranged. The result would settle it. The result would give Graham back his sense of reality, his footing, his ability to understand what had actually happened to him. The result came back. Dionne Marie Hanna was his biological mother. Every single thing she had done, the email, the warmth, the gifts, the inheritance story, the gentle escalating requests that drained £300,000 from a man who trusted her completely, had been done by the woman who gave him life. She had not found a vulnerable stranger. She had found her own son, and she had looked him in the eye, held his newborn child in her arms, accepted his love without hesitation, and stolen everything anyway. The money was not the only thing Dionne took. She took the relationship too. The financial destruction that swept through Graham's life did not stay contained to bank accounts and savings. It moved into everything, into the trust between two people trying to build a family, into the future that Graham and Heather were carrying together when that first email arrived. Under the weight of nearly £300,000 in debt and the particular grief of what had caused it, the relationship collapsed. Heather took their son and moved back to New Zealand, and Graham Hornigold was left in the UK, broke, divorced, separated from his child, and holding a kind of pain that has no precise name in any language. Not just the pain of being defrauded, the pain of being defrauded by the person's existence you spent your entire life quietly mourning. Then Netflix released Con Mom. The documentary reached millions of viewers across the world, and in Singapore, something extraordinary happened. Victims who recognized Dionne's methods, who had lived through versions of the same constructed warmth, the same impossible promises, the same slow, careful theft, came forward and filed police reports. Authorities began connecting the cases. At least 5 separate fraud victims, losses exceeding $149,000, a pattern so deliberate and so consistent that it could only belong to someone who had done this before. In April 2025, Dionne Marie Hanna, 84 years old, was charged with fraud in Singapore, facing up to 20 years in prison. Justice arrived, late, imperfect, and carrying none of the things that had already been lost. A son's savings, a family, a childhood question that finally got answered in the worst possible way. Some things, once taken, cannot be returned.